Hi guys. First of all, I'm so sorry for putting the deadline wrong on Canvas. I know I caused a bunch of freakouts. Please accept my apologies. It's not due until July, so we can take a deep breath on that one. This is a super informal video. I just wanted to record real quickly and get out to you guys so that you could understand kind of what I'm looking for with the project, with the final project proposal, and that sort of thing. I tried to make it look as casual as possible. I'm even wearing a hoodie. I don't know what more else I could do. But let's go ahead and take a look here. I do have a brief presentation that I did put together, as well as the actual assignment description on Canvas here. So let's talk about this final project. So this final project is a big portion of your grade. It's called the Practitioner's Policy Analysis. I'll talk a little bit more about what that means, but just for understanding, in a policy and administration sort of class, it is meant to be super applicable. We are in a very fortunate field in which we can actively use our research and use our skills from the academic world and apply it to the practical world, and then take the lessons from the practical world and apply it back in the academic world. This is how I personally choose to identify as what we call a pracademic, a practitioner and an academic who seeks to meld those opportunities. So that is why this is such a big portion of your grade, because what we are doing in a public policy type class is we are applying the research to the field and analyzing the field with research. We are doing both of those things. It is the biggest skill that you will come away with, is that ability to meld those two things. So represents 40% of your grade. 35% is that final project, that final paper that you're going to turn into me on August 1st. 5% is the project proposal that is not due this Friday, but is instead due on July 1st. Keep in mind, there is also another reading response due that day, so make sure you're budgeting your time correctly. So this is a written analysis that I want you to write as if you're completing it for a specific institution. The actual paper itself, since this is a majority of the questions I'm going to get, the actual paper itself, what it should look like, how long it should be, there aren't a lot of rules. I'm going to run through a little bit today what that should look like, what things I'm looking for, but ultimately, I would anticipate it to be about 20 pages long, but if you need to do more than that, or if you don't need full 20 pages, that's totally fine. As long as you're using your words efficiently, you're fully answering your question, right? And what I'm expecting at the end is a final deliverable PDF with a cover page, table of contents, bibliography, and appendices if necessary. These are all important components if you were doing it for a job as well. This is all the sort of stuff that you would need to complete. There would also be likely some sort of presentation involved. Because of our time constraints, I'm not going to be doing a presentation component of it. You'll just be turning in this final written PDF. So, what you should be doing right now is, since this summer session is moving so quickly, you should be identifying the issue or topic that you want to talk about in detail. So you're going to be doing a lot of research on this topic, so make sure it's something that you're genuinely interested in. We can talk about things like charter schools or standardized tests like we've already discussed in class, or you can choose something from your own interests, whether it's the effect of Title I schools. You want to talk about infrastructure and transportation. You want to talk about turnaround schools. You want to talk about teacher pay. You want to talk about school safety. Any of these are absolutely fine. Just make sure it's something that you were super interested in and is definitely an education policy topic. Then the next step you should take is identify at what level and for what institution you would like to write the analysis. So this is where we would differ from a lot of situations. But what you're going to be doing is selecting either the federal level, the state level, or the local level, and picking an institution that this issue is relevant for, it's right within, and selecting that institution. So for example, if you wanted to do a paper on teacher pay, You could write that for the Federal Department of Education. You could write it for the State Board of Education or the State Department of Education, or you could write it for individual school districts or even individual schools. That's one of those issues that has different dynamics depending on where you look. Now, what we're learning so far is that depending on what level you talk about, it's going to determine what that institution can actually do. So if we have something like you want to talk about sex ed curriculum, the federal government can't do a ton about sex ed curriculum, right? But if you selected the federal government, that's going to change and alter the options that you're going to be able to propose for them, right? Now, with a curriculum, you want to look at the state and local level if you want to get into the actual minutia of what that should look like. But you just want to be thinking about that. Then, this is really important. Reach out to me and set up an appointment with me to discuss your topic. If you do not do this component, you are going to be left to the wolves in terms of what your project looks like. I will not be able to do any sort of quality control. I won't be able to help you refine your topic, and you may end up with something that isn't what necessarily what we're looking for. And so make sure you reach out to me. I will help you refine your topic. I will help you come up with some clear parameters, and we can set some clear expectations about what your paper should look like on an individual level. That's the benefit of having a small class of 5 like we do. So you must reach out to me and make sure you do that before July 1st. When this proposal is due, so that you have plenty of time to write all this down in the proposal and turn that in on time, leaving you plenty of time to start work. The earlier you do that, though, the easier it is for you to start doing the research, right? So, what to expect in this actual paper. Now, this is where it's going to get a little hazy. So, I'm not going to tell you exactly what it should look like in terms of what should be incorporated, but I will tell you what the minimum I'm looking for is, and it's these 4 things. So first is the issue summary. This is the one you could start doing research on literally right now if you chose to, because it's just discussing the dynamics of the issue or topic you're interested in, and then talking about what effect that has on schools. Then there's policy alternatives. So these are the different options that you're going to be analyzing. The mechanism for analysis. So we'll talk about that too. That's how you actually score and figure out which of your alternatives is the best one so that you can make a policy recommendation. So let's talk about a little of these in detail. Issue summary, like I said, the easiest one, it's the research you can start right now if you know what topic you're going to talk about. This is, you're going to dive into this issue from a broad and an individual level. You should discuss how long this issue has been affecting the schools, what would happen if it went unchanged, and how this affects the student experience in the classroom. Remember, the answer to that could be very minimally, right? If we're talking about something like teacher pay, for example, right? There may be not as much of an impact on the student experience in the classroom as if we were talking about sex ed curriculum, because that's going to literally change how they talk about things in schools. Whatever topic you may want, start doing that initial research right now. Start looking at those articles. Start reading into what other places have done, and what angles you can take on it. The better you do the issue summary, the easier the rest of the project is going to be. Next is the policy alternatives. This is really, 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 really important, right? So, a policy analysis document like this is supposed to be actionable. Someone should be able to take it and say, cool, I know what I can do from here. I know in general what the outcome would look like, what the costs and benefits are, that sort of stuff. So, if you haven't taken a policy analysis class before, this is going to be a super, super shallow dive into what an analysis looks like. So, you should select 3 options and identify them in relation to your institution and your issue. So, that includes things that other places have done. So if you're writing for an individual school district you're interested in, then you can look at what other school districts have done to address that same issue. But policy analysis is both a science and an art, because sometimes you're going to come across an issue and there hasn't been a lot of solutions, a lot of work done on it. You then have the responsibility as the researcher, as the analyst, for coming up for what those options look like. They don't need to be super detailed. You're not writing legislation for people, but you would want to think about, like, okay, what are the different ways we can approach this? I now know this issue. I know the different dynamics. I know what my institution can do. And so we're going to apply that here. The general rule for selecting your options is you want to put them on some sort of scale. You want to select an extreme, an aggressive, or a liberal option. Notice it's small L liberal, because the extreme aggressive option is not always aligned with the left wing of American politics, right? Small L liberal option, it's the one where we try to do the most. Then there's some sort of moderate option, some sort of middle ground. And then there's a limited or conservative option, right? That's where you're not taking as aggressive of a policy decision and what impact that may have overall. Now, I say that's a general rule because that's not always going to be the case. Not every issue has an easily scaled liberal, moderate, conservative approach. That's just the general rule you can work off of. So, while I tell you there need to be three alternatives at least, you're all going to have four, because one option in every policy analysis is nothing, is do nothing. What do we know about policy actors in our country? We know that they like to do nothing. The reason for that is that it's real easy to do nothing. It requires the least amount of effort. So, you always want to include the status quo in your paper. This is good for comparison. It's almost like a control in statistics, right? Where you're saying, like, if we did nothing, here's what would happen. And then you can say, if we did this, this, and this, here's what would happen. You'd be able to say, as compared to doing nothing, this is what happened. Now, remember, just because the status quo is here doesn't mean the status quo is inherently going to be the worst option, right? You may come up with some sort of policy solution that when you actually analyze it, you realize, oh shit, that's actually worse than just doing nothing and leaving it alone. There may be some sort of outcome you may not have realized. So that's all stuff you've got to keep in mind. This is setting a framework for you to be able to analyze the different options and make the best recommendation possible. All right, third part. If you need a drink of water, if you need to catch your breath, please do it before this, because this is really important. The mechanism for analysis, or the analytical criteria, is the core methodology of your paper. It is the center of what you will be doing. So, before you select your alternatives, you want to understand what you're going to judge those alternatives on, right? Just because we have a race doesn't mean we inherently have a winner. We need a finish line. We need to understand what we are going to judge these on and how are we going to compare them. So, you will need to figure out what criteria are most applicable for you. What I've listed here are 4 to 5 of the most common criteria that apply in a lot of general policy analyses, right? Efficiency, which is it the smartest use of money for what we're getting? Effectiveness, is it doing what we expect it to be doing? Political feasibility, is it possible given the political environment? We think about our politics stream and our Kindle model, right? Is that possible? Equity, which is real important in education policy, right? What is the effect of this on different types of schools and different types of students? Rural, urban, wealthy, poor, private, public, that sort of stuff, right? And legality. Legality is not something you must include. None of these are technically something you must include, but these are all the base level criteria by which you would judge the options. You must clearly define your analytical criteria. This is the rules to the game. Imagine you went to a soccer game and they didn't have any lines on the field. And they didn't have any referees. It's chaos because everyone is playing by their own rules and you never know who won because you can't trust anything. This is your rules. You're setting them out in your paper so that you know what rules everything's going to play by as you complete the analysis. Like I said, if you choose efficiency, which I always recommend you choose efficiency, you would want to define efficiency. You can find another definition for it. You can construct your own using your research. And it's going to be something along the lines of, given the cost, whether it's hard costs or soft costs that go into this option as compared to what we're getting from it. A great example would be, let's say your policy, your issue is graduation rate. You want to improve graduation rates among low-income students of a specific school district. Great. There are going to be different options that are going to have different costs, whether it's maybe hiring new faculty, whether it's constructing new curriculum, whether it's creating new after-school programs, whatever that may be based on your research. That is all going to have a cost. Then you're going to have to find some way of projecting out what the effect is. That may be something hugely quantitative, like you could literally say another school district did this exact option and improved their graduation rates by this much, right? Or you may not have that specific of detail, and you'll just have to say, I expect the impact to be this based off of the cost. Like I said, art and a science, right? There's not a lot of rules. If you wanted to find effectiveness is it actually accomplishing something? Is it doing what we want it to? Or is there a lot of waste within the process? Political feasibility, equity, all that same thing. There are other criteria, and in our one-on-one, we will be discussing what criteria you're going to want to use so that you can set yourself up for success. Once you have those criteria defined, you construct a matrix. The matrix looks something like this. You have on one axis the criteria that you have defined, and you have on the other axis your options. So in my example, we have the status quo, we have our aggressive, our moderate, and our conservative options. Then you've got to do some sort of thing to be able to store them either against one another or against the criteria. So how do we do that? We can rank them. So we could say if our criteria is equity, based off of my research, option 2 is the most equitable and option 3 is the least equitable, and you can rank them, and then you in your analysis will discuss why you ranked them that way. Or you could store them objectively. So this is something that would be super applicable for like a quantitative analysis. You could say like, this is the cost that goes into it, and then this is the outcome. I know for each of them, this is what that number will be. Or it could just be a straight dichotomy. One of your criteria could simply be, is it equitably informed? Or is it legally justifiable? Yes or no? What you do with that, then, is completely up to you. There are different ways by which you could store these. So you can store each criteria individually and then rank them, add up the columns, or add up each option, and whatever option has the highest or lowest final score is the best option. There is also more subjective ways you could do it. So Why this step is really important is that you've got to be able to have some way of measuring these criteria. It must be comparable across each option. So if you choose some criteria, let's say environmental sustainability, for example, that's not going to be always super applicable in education policy, but let's say that's something you chose. You may have options that have a clear environmental component that you can measure, and then you may have one option that doesn't have a clear component. If you have an option that doesn't have a clear component, you have to make a determination about whether that criteria is still valuable at that point. So, to measure each criteria, there are a couple of different ways we can do it, and we've talked about this in class so far. There's a quantitative way and a qualitative way. It's the measurability of these outcomes, right? So the first one you can do is a quantitative analysis. If you have a statistics background, if you have a research design background, use those skills as you see fit. But quantitative analysis doesn't actually have to be scary. One of the easiest way to do it is pick what the outcome is going to be. So what is the measurable outcome you're looking for, like your graduation rates or test scores or something like that. And take your cost and do some simple math. What is our anticipated cost of this option divided by what is the outcome? Then essentially you could then say, I'm spending X amount of dollars per a 1 point increase in test scores or a 1% increase in graduation rates. And that's a good way to quantitatively measure your criteria without doing a whole lot of hard math, right? I'm not here to teach you quantitative methods. I'm not here to teach you statistics. If you do have those, I will happily talk to you about that, and I will happily critique your methods in that way, but I'm not expecting that. Instead, I want you to be creative in the way that you're measuring it, and as long as you're fair and consistent and lay out why you made that decision, that's okay. Here's the secret. In a policy analysis, there are always going to be restrictions. Those restrictions may be cost, it may be time, it may be skill set. All you want to do is explain those restrictions and what effect that has on your paper. If you don't know how to do a deep quantitative analysis on a specific criteria, but you know one can be done, say that. That's fine. I'm not going to punish you because you don't know how to do that. Like I said, I'm not teaching you statistics. What I want you to do is be able to understand, if you make a decision to measure something a certain way, what effect does that have on your final product? Quantitative analyses are really good for those cost and those efficiency criteria, right? The ones that are super measurable. However, there's not every criteria is going to be super measurable. Effectiveness is sometimes a qualitative issue. Equity is a qualitative issue. Political feasibility is almost always a qualitative issue. This is where you would write a research-based narrative, where you can say how each option impacts something like equity in an example community, right? If another city did something or another community did something, you could say, here's what they did, here's what effect it had on X criteria, here's why I believe that's applicable here. And that's how you give it that score. You've just got to have some way to compare those then. Now, if you think about it, quantitative scores, quantitative measures are real easy to compare to one another, right? Quantitative, not so much. So you've got to have some clear way of comparing your different analytical criteria. This should all be written down and justified in your methodology section. This is why, if you do not have a research design background, it's really important for you to meet with me and for you to seek out feedback, because I'm going to help guide you through this process, and you're either going to have a good application of your research design and methodology background, or you're going to have a leg up when you go into that class, all right? And then finally, you have a policy recommendation. Now, I want you guys to listen to me closely. Every policy analysis should come with a recommendation, because that's why you're writing it. You're not writing it for no reason. This isn't a paper you're going to turn in and never see again, right? The idea is that you're writing it for this institution for them to be able to take action. You're now the expert on this topic. Make a recommendation. Say, this is the option that, based off of my criteria, is the best. Then you should clearly describe the implications for your option. So let's say you decide you're going to store your criteria a certain way, and then you say the option that, or the alternative that wins is the least equitable option. Or the alternative that wins is completely politically infeasible. You now have to describe the implications for that option, right? You have to say, based off of my analyses, I recommend this. However, we understand that maybe this option has been challenged in court before, or this option is only supported by a one side of the political spectrum or the other, and so you must have the particular political dynamics to be able to make that happen, right? Be able to clearly describe this. But this is really important. The only way you will fail this paper is if you don't turn in something complete, or you write me an ideological document. Policy analysis is not ideological. You may personally disagree with the conclusion your research draws, but you must use the rules you set up to its logical conclusion. You must see it all the way through. Now, I understand bias is inevitable. It's inevitable in everything we write, and it's unavoidable. But it is our ethical responsibility to minimize bias as much as possible. That's why we lay out our methodology. That's why we choose our analytical criteria. And that's why we do that all before we actually conduct our analysis. It is not an ideological document. If you write me something that is not following your methodology, that is not clearly, or that is clearly motivated by some sort of personal, ideological, or political agenda, you will fail this paper. That is 100%. I do not have a concern about any one of you doing this, but I want to be clear up front that this is my expectation, okay? You can have your opinions backed up by research, backed up by this, but if you choose an option that is the politically most desirable for you, that is not supported by the rest of your research, you will fail this project. Full stop. Finally, other considerations to keep in mind. There are no hard and fast templates for a policy analyst. There's no way for me to be able to hand you a document and say, just fill in the blanks. Because like I said, it's an art and a science. The science is, you need to have these different characteristics, you need to have these different options, you need to have a methodology, you need to have a recommendation. But everything else is pretty much up to you. The way each person's paper is going to look is going to be different depending on what your topic is and what your approach is. Two of you may select the exact same topic in the exact same institution and have radically different papers, and that's okay. What I need you to do is I need you to trust yourself and trust your research as you write. As you go through this process, trust yourself, ask questions, but trust yourself as you make a decision. If you need to measure something, you say, I need to measure equity, but I don't know if there's a clear, fair way to do this, so I'm going to make this decision. Trust that decision. Justify it, write it down, but trust that decision. That is going to be super important, because if you do not trust yourself, your final paper is going to be tepid and it's going to be a bad paper. You've got to trust your own instincts. Every single one of you is very intelligent. You're in this program for a reason. Now, it's time to trust those skills and apply them here. The other component I want to point out is that the more feedback you seek, the better your final project will be. Your graduate students, I'm not going to tell you need to turn in drafts and outlines and everything like that. All I'm going to do is request a project proposal from you that will allow me to make sure that you're on the right path from the beginning. And then I'm going to have you turn in the final project. Everything else you do is up to you. If you need me to review drafts, tell me. I will happily do it. With the understanding that these papers are going to be longer, right? I may need 3 to 5 days to review the papers. So set yourself up for success. Create a game plan, follow your game plan, and get the feedback you need. This is especially critical if you have not taken research methods or quantitative analysis yet. If you haven't taken either of those classes, it's really important to make sure that you're getting the feedback, because I'm going to help walk you through what this should feel like and what this should look like. So let's go ahead and look at this proposal now. So this is what you're seeing here. I can even look at it from your perspective. Let me check it. So project proposal, like I said, due on July 1st, not this Friday. I'm sorry. This kind of lays out what I've talked about in general. And here's a bunch of recommendations. So if you chose standardized testing, you could apply that to the Department of Education in terms of like No Child Left Behind. You could also apply that at the local level. You could talk about teacher pay at the state level, state educators associations. We haven't even talked about unions yet, but we will talk about unions. You could talk about teacher pay in that, school conditions, benefits, that sort of stuff. Any local school district, if you wanted to do a local school district, you could talk about critical race theory. You could talk about LGBTQ plus students and staff and how they're treated. You could talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. You could talk about school conditions and infrastructure there. You could even talk at the individual school level if you chose to. Whatever you choose is totally fine, but it's going to change the way your research progresses, which is why it's important for you to meet. Here's what needs to go into this proposal. The idea behind this proposal is that I'm setting you up for success. I want you to have a proposal that you turn in that I can then say, you're ready to do your paper. So, first thing, issue summary. Like I said, summarize the issue. What are places doing to address it? What information is important to understand that issue? First part. Second part, institutional summary. You've selected an institution. Excellent. What is that institution doing? What powers do they have? If you select the Department of Education, your institution can do a bunch of different things than if you selected a local school district. So, what is that institution? What are the specific dynamics? What are the demographics of that institution? What are the conditions that we need to know about? And then what powers do they have so that you can understand what options you may be able to come up with, right? Then, I'm sorry, but because not everyone has a research design background, I want you to complete an annotated bibliography. So, what this is, simply, is choosing 2 to 3 keystone reference documents that are central to your project. So this is, as you're doing your research, you found this comprehensive analysis on the effect of standardized testing on student performance. You're like, wow, this is really important. I feel like I'm going to use this a lot. Cool. That is one of your keystone documents, and I want you to write an annotated bibliography for it. At least one reference should be academic. Not everything you find is going to be academic. That's what's great about our field, right? But at least one of them should be an academic study that was completed. Here's what goes into that. Each reference should have a full citation, an annotated comment on the publisher. So was it published by something reputable? Was it published by the institution itself? What effect does that have? And a review of any data, methodology, or conclusion that's relevant for you. So if this paper uses a methodology that you're going to then pick apart and say, I believe that this is done really well, but I don't believe that this was done really well, you must note that. If you've never written an annotated bibliography before, I have linked it right here. This is Purdue OWL, How to Write an Annotated Bibliography. Very simple. It's essentially a citation with a paragraph or two underneath it talking about the value of the source. Okay. If you have trouble with this, let me know. But I want you to do this and really be set up for success going forward. And then an outline. Like I said, you want to prepare an outline that includes 1-sentence summaries of what will be included in each section. So at least here's what I'm expecting. An executive summary, This is just a summary of what you conclude, so that in a 2 to 3 sentences, I can understand what you're about to read or what you're about to write about. The issue background, so the issue summary, methodology, what your methods are, your policy options, and your policy recommendations. At this point, I do not expect you to have your policy options. I don't even necessarily expect you to have your analytical criteria done at this point, but I want you to put together this outline so that you can start seeing, okay, what is my paper going to look like? The idea behind the outline is that you can then write inside of the outline and your paper will just fill out from the inside out, as opposed to you trying to construct it from scratch. The final component is you must meet with me. If you do not do this, you are setting yourself up for failure. I am going to repeat that. If you do not meet with me, you are setting yourself up for failure. I am only able to help you as much as you're willing to talk to me and have a conversation about what you need for your success. So, reach out to me, set up a meeting. It'll be only 20 to 30 minutes. It doesn't need to be more than that. I just want to be able to talk to you so that you're set up for success for your paper. Okay? And then here's the rubric, 25 points. That means the final project will be 175 points if you want to do the math there. So that is the final project. I am going to record another one of these probably after our midterm, maybe after everyone's turned in their final their project proposals, and I will try to provide more detail as we move along. But this, I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to hear what this project is about. Like I said, if we were meeting in person, I would be able to just talk about this in class, but I will record a separate video. I will link it in our key course items, important course content. That's what I called it up here, so that you can see this video and this presentation. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. I want everyone to have a good rest of your day, and please stay safe.